violence and evil. After all, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. But death is inseparable from our nature. So why count war and evil when war itself is inseparable from our nature? For it was from the very inception of life that we were in competition with each other. From the very moment life sprung into being, it was competing. From the moment life spread into being, it was reproducing and adapting, a perpetual river of war for billions of years. And the war that we think of, the one fought with swords and bows and arrows and later guns and gunpowder and drones and electricity, these things, they're simply an extension of that great adaptation that life has always been going through. War is not an evil, nor is it a good. War is part of life itself, as reproduction and love is, or as sadness and grief. War is an extension of death and life itself. War is where they meet. No life is complete without war, because as a species and as life itself, we are built to adapt. We are built for adaptation and competition. And to reject competition as a whole and to believe it as a virtue, you are a coward. You are no monk, no virtue. War itself is a virtue. There is no such thing as good and evil, merely power. It is the powerful who decides good, it is the powerful who decide evil. And it is the whims of the powerful that make us believe what is right and wrong. In eras past, it was the powerful who made us believe war was a virtue, and in this era now, it is the powerful who detest war. Because in eras past, the powerful believed that they could hold on to their power by idolizing war, but in eras now, the powerful have adapted and realized by conditioning people to believe war is sin, they will be weak and unable to overthrow the truly powerful who know the truth. War is God. And there is no greater God than the one who has all the power in the world to decide right and wrong. Right and wrong are subjective right up until blades clash and guns fire. And the one who comes out still standing, that is the one who is right. No matter how evil or non-virtuous from one's perspective, unless you are willing to enforce that perspective in what is war, then your virtues are nothing more than notions. And your notions are myths and fictions that you can only give some sort of reasoning for. There is no such thing as reasoning. No argument or conflict was ever solved by reasoning. War can only be solved by superior force or by forces being unable to achieve victory. Stalemate is not the victory of reason. It is the concession that victory is not available to either side. From the very moment we were born, we were told that war is sin, that violence is to be abhorred. But it was violence that brought us into this world. There is no such thing as a world without violence. We merely live in the greatest era of peace the world has ever seen. We can turn our heads and pretend war on the fringes. In Myanmar, in Sudan, in South Sudan, Ethiopia, Ukraine, we can pretend it doesn't exist, and as if it isn't the natural state of humanity. But it is. And as we grow old, we will watch war unfold, because in truth, eras of peace cannot last. Because eras of peace are eras of rearmament. And we live in the longest era of peace in human history. The most peaceful era in human history. And what is an era of peace but a soft moment to create better weaponry? War is God. And although one would assert God is dead, that God shall be resolved and revived in a blaze of glory that will define our lifetimes. There is no virtue and solace for those unwilling to go to war, merely annihilation. Those who refused war do not exist anymore. Those who resolve themselves to peace do not make it through history as anything but footnotes. But those who would virtue war, those who would idolize it, are the ones that we are descended from. Where we are now, Florida, 10,000 years ago, there was no man until man came and tamed the land and bent it to its will. 2,000 years ago, they had polities and kingdoms. 1,000 years ago, they were something we'd actually understand. 500 years ago, they made contact with the Spanish and died of disease and war in rapid succession. 200 years ago, the Timucuan were extinct because the Seminole, the Spanish, and the white Europeans could better use war. 100 years ago, the Seminole were annihilated by our ancestors, the Americans. And 10 years ago, our society remains firm as it is now. We have tamed the wilderness and swamp of Florida because we understand the virtue of war. And to pretend that it is not a virtue is to betray what put us on this land in the first place. We have no right to this land by history or virtue or by anything but merit of violence. And to pretend that anything else decides who lives and dies besides merit of violence is a fiction, a lie that the violent would sell to you to keep you complacent and unwilling to engage in necessary violence. There is no greater virtue in the world to defend yourself, and there is no greater ambition than to take from others what you want to be rightfully yours, because in truth, there is no right to what is yours, merely what you can control. So how was my villain monologue?